I'm Mike Kelly from Project Healing Waters Omaha, and tonight we have a special guest tire. But before we get started, I have a couple quick announcements. Next week is session 5 of the beginner fly tying class. We'll be doing the Zug Bug. We'll be set up at the MVSC in Bellevue around 5:30 for a 6 o'clock start. And then on April 25th, we'll be Zoom only. I'll demonstrate 2 of my favorite spring crappie streamers, the Black-Nosed Dace and the Mickey Finn. And then May 2nd will be Zoom only, and it'll be viewer's choice. John, do you have any other announcements before we get started?
No, not this month.
Okay. Well, our special guest tonight is Tim Jacobs. And Tim is from Newcastle, Colorado. I met Tim at the Denver Fly Fishing Show. He does amazing work with deer hair and other flies. He's on the Whiting Farms, Regal Vice, and Nature Spirit Pro staff. He's been a guide, a casting instructor, and a fly tying demonstrator for numerous fly fishing shows and fly shops. Tim has published numerous articles and is the author of 2 excellent books, Tying and Fishing Deer Hair Flies, which I have, and Tactics for Bass and Other Warm Water Species. Tonight he'll demonstrate some deer hair work and discuss how to fish it and answer any questions that we have. So with that, Tim, I'll hand it over to you, and it's all yours.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, guys. Well, thank you for inviting me. It's a real privilege to be here and get to do some tying. So what I'm going to do tonight is I thought I'd just kind of go through deer hair, and most of it, of course, deer hair is used in a lot of things. I'm going to actually demonstrate a really quick little technique for doing deer hair hopper heads and muddler heads here. I'm not actually going to have the whole fly done, but I'll just kind of show you real quickly how to do that. But first, what I thought I'd do is I kind of go through deer hair and just kind of show you, because you walk into a fly shop. By the way, just so you know, if I'm looking over here, I have a monitor over on this side. So a lot of times it's hard, for me to stare at the camera. A lot of times I look over here for reference, and that's why I keep looking to my right. I thought I'd go through deer hair and show you the different kinds of deer hair you're going to find in a fly shop, what it's used for, because picking the right deer hair for the purpose in fly tying is really important. And basically you can break deer hair down into kind of basically 3 categories. One is early season deer hair, and I'll show you. I don't have any really good early season. I didn't grab any. Early season hair is short, and it's got really nice fine tips on it. And by the way, most of the hair, in fact, all the hair you're going to see here is white-tailed deer hair. I was acquainted with Chris Helm, and he's probably was one of the foremost experts on processing deer and understanding deer hair as a tying material. And one of the things he said is the best whitetail comes from southern Michigan, northern Ohio, northern India, kind of that area in there where there's a lot of farms and a lot of the deer are corn fed. The hair is their hair is pretty healthy. But all of it's going to be whitetail hair. So anyway, that early season hair is the hair that we pick for tying little comparidons and little hair wing patterns, little hair wing dry fly patterns, that kind of thing. From there, you move to kind of more of the mid-season hair. And this is a good example of mid-season hair. You can see it's, maybe 1.5 inches long. What's nice about this hair is you can see the really nice tips on it. And I'm going to use this hair and demo a hopper head in just a minute. This stuff is packaged, as Mike said, I'm a Nature Spirit protein guy. But before I was a Nature Spirit, I'll tell you how I got to be a Nature Spirit protein guy. I used to purchase my hair through a local fly shop, And rightly so, they decided to discontinue my discount with them. And I always just put in pretty big orders. So I gave Nature Spirit a call, and it was just one of those serendipitous moments when they're putting together a pro team. And so they invited me to be part of their pro team. So all the hair you see that I'm tying here with is all Nature Spirit processed hair, or I have some Wapsi Primo strips. If you're familiar with deer hair, they're those long strips of hair, and that some of it is really nice. And I'm going to show you some of that in a minute. But this is kind of mid-season hair, and it's either labeled as hopper hair or sometimes it's labeled as all-purpose hair. The other hair that I use a lot, I'm going to pull these out. This is a group of bass bugs that I just was working on. They're not quite finished yet, but you can see how brightly colored they are. Okay. All these brightly colored bugs come from deer belly hair. And deer belly hair, here's a piece that I've been tying with, is naturally white. So when it dies to these really vibrant, beautiful colors. I mean, the colors are just, they really pop. And so you can see on those little poppers I just showed you that, the colors are really bright on it. So that's deer belly. And so if you want to tie stuff that's going to be good and bright, deer belly is the way to go. And then the final hair is what's labeled spinning hair. And I got a couple of pretty nice pieces here. This is late season hair. You can see it's, what is this, maybe about 2.5 inches long or so. What happens on this is a pretty good piece. The tips are still pretty good on this. What happens as you get into late season hair is sometimes the tips start getting more straggly. So if you're wanting to stack and make a collar, this late season hair is not as good as that mid-season hair is, which has those really great tips. But you'll notice that the colors are a lot duller. I mean, I'll just grab this as an example here. You can see, I guess, yeah, you can see it in the camera there. This one here is body hair, and you can see it's a great color. It's a beautiful color, but it's a more muted yellow than this hair is. Now, I don't know if they actually do different dyes on them or not. Let me get this. The lighting is being a little weird on it. Actually, I don't know why. The dark color, this hair is not dark down here. I'm seeing, I don't know if you're seeing that, but it's really this very bright yellow. But you can see the difference in the two. And I think a lot of that, I'm not an expert on dyeing, but I think a lot of that is the underlying color of the hair affecting the way it's dyed. But the advantage of this kind of hair is it's long and you can tie pretty big patterns with it. I'll just show you one here. This is a pretty good size bass bug. Let me drop my camera down here now, so you guys can see a little better. This is a pretty good sized bass bug right here. This one is probably one of the, well, it's one of the bigger ones I probably fished for largemouth bass in the summer. But you can see that the colors are much more muted, whereas these guys, you can see just how brightly colored they are. So that's kind of a quick rundown of deer hair and the kinds of hair you're going to find. The other thing you want to do, if you're planning on spinning deer hair bass bugs, one of the things you want to do when you go into a fly shop is don't just, go, hell, they're spinning hair, I'm just going to grab this piece. I want a piece of yellow deer hair. Don't do that. Go through, if they got a stack of 4 or 5 bundles, go through and squeeze them. Give them a little squeeze. And the ones that are spongier are the ones you want to take for spinning. And the reason is deer hair. Let's see if I can find, yeah, this piece is pretty good, I think. Yeah, okay. So you should be able to see in the camera here, you can see the little crinkles in the hair. What those crinkles are is they are little air pockets. Part of the way the animal's insulated is they have an underfur, but the deer hair itself, we say it's hollow. It's not hollow like a straw. It's actually cellular. And those pockets, when compressed, are what makes the hair flare. And so you can feel that those air pockets by squeezing the hair. If you feel something that's hard and flat, and you'll find those pieces now and then, that hair, while it may flare a little bit, is not going to flare like the ones that have this really soft, nice texture. And so that's the stuff that you want to find and you want to grab. The other thing about deer hair,
Interrupt real quick.
yeah, go ahead, jump in.
So maybe you saw this in Michigan when you lived there. We're in the Omaha area. We don't really have fly shops per se. We have Cabela's and Bass Pro Shops with their fly fishing department. And then we have online. So a lot of times when we're buying deer hair for this kind of stuff or for other projects, we're not at the luxury of being able to go in there and feel for sponginess and everything. So
Yep.
there
Yeah.
are some fly shops that you run across that have a pretty good customer service department where you can call them on the phone and say, I can't come in and feel it, but this is what I'm looking for. So I think it's good that you mentioned that sponginess and what you're using the flies for mainly.
Yeah.
To tell to a fly shop when you call them on the phone online, an online fly shop like say Fly Fish Food, what's Kelly Gallup's the slide
Yeah.
in, all Charlie's
Yeah.
Fly Box, all the different major things, but there's some smaller ones too. To even maybe Nature Spirit, go online and see if you can find a customer service and tell them you want to order some stuff, but you want it to be for this type of a fly. I think
Yeah.
the
And
key.
I think if you talk to somebody and explain what you want and what you're doing with it, I would think a good fly shop should send you good materials. I bulk order from Nature Spirit, and I occasionally get pieces of hair that just they're not going to do what I want it to do. I've got, in fact, I have a Wapsi, I have a Wapsi Primo strip of black, and it's a big chunk of hair and it just barely flares. And so it happens. And I understand that if you don't have a fly shop, the truth is most of my hair I do order through Nature Spirit. I go down, I go to Denver, and Anglers All out in Santa Fe is one of the fly shops that I patronize a lot. And but I never buy deer. I don't buy deer hair. I don't buy whiting products. I mean, all that stuff I order directly. I know I recognize and I'm grateful that I have kind of a line on materials that some guys might not have the same access to. But I think if you talk to fly shops, a good fly shop should work with you and send you what you need. But then you can describe what you're looking for. I will say this: most of the pieces, if you're ordering blind and you don't know, most of the Nature Spirit pieces that are labeled spinning hair, I've rarely found a piece that doesn't work reasonably well. I mean, some pieces, all the animals are different. Some pieces are better than others, but I've rarely have I come across a piece. I think Nature Spirit does a really nice job of grading their hair and processing their hair. So anyway, any other questions on selecting hair or anything like that?
I have a question. This is
Yeah, go
Joe.
ahead.
Now I've got some hair here, but it does feel pretty flat. So I guess I'll have to ask the guy a question, and it's from somebody we've had here featured on hair and stuff. So, and it's Josh. A couple pieces are nice and fluffy, but if you I just put mine in a little box. That's the only place I got to store stuff. Does that ruin the hair, or do you need to have the hair always hung up by the piece? By the
No, you don't have to. Storage of it, I don't think storage of it matters. I mean, I just have all my pieces in a big bin. They're all together, and some are still in the package, but once I dive into them, sometimes the packaging goes away. And I've never had any storage issues with processed hair. Now, if you get if you have a buddy who goes deer hunting and he gets you a natural piece of hair, depending on how they process it and what they do with it, that I don't know, that it's interesting when I go through deer hair, when I'm tying deer hair, it's it happens, I quite often I'll be combing through it and I'll find a little tick that comes out. It's dead, of course, because it's been dyed and processed. But I'll find little ticks in the hair. So I'm assuming those guys are roaming around in there when the hide is fresh. So, that's the only thing. I think only if you had a fresh hide would I be concerned about. But I can tell you, all my hair just gets stored in bins, and I never have any issues with it.
Yeah,
Yeah, I've got a piece of
fresh hide.
vintage
We do
too.
get fresh hide here in Omaha. We have a lot of guys that contribute it to us. So for Healing Waters, and what we always do, or at least what I always do, put them in a plastic bag, stick them right in the freezer for about 4 or 5 months, and that usually. I've had the same situation. I've had a piece of elk hair that I started working, and it was just full of those dead ticks. I'd
Yeah.
never seen anything like that before.
Yeah. And I'm not the person to Chris Helm was the expert on this stuff, along with some other people around the country. I don't process hides. I don't dye. I don't do any of those things. I work with fly tying prepared materials. That's just one side of it that I just, there's so much in fly fishing as it is. That's just kind of one little avenue that I've not gone down, So any other questions before I move on?
Thank you.
Okay. All right. Okay. So now the next thing, let's see here. The next thing about working with deer hair is the thread that you choose. And this thread, let me point my camera down at my vise now. Yeah. A little bit of a close-up view here. Oops, there we go. Now we're kind of centered there. Now I think I'm focused. The thread that I use is a gel spun thread. It's Semperfi, they call it nano silk. I use UTC primarily. Nature Spirit distributes UTC. I use UTC GSP thread. This that I have in my hand is a 75 denier. Let me see, can I zoom? It's weird, I can't zoom with my camera. This stuff is, what's nice about this is for a given diameter, it's stronger than wax nylon threads of the same size. I mean, significantly stronger. What's different about it though is, let me grab a wax nylon here. I can just demonstrate real quick for you. So I have a wax nylon, and I'm going to do what we call a jam knot. Okay. So when I come in here and I wrap like 3 or 4 times, notice that, whoops, it did slip off, but it started to adhere. Let's try that one more time. Okay. Notice that it's there. It's pretty tight. You can see I'm moving the hook shank a little bit. Gel spun, on the other hand, it's not going to do that. There's no wax on it. It just slips off. You see it slide off. So, but you want to tie with it, because the advantage of tying with it is the strength. It's just so much stronger than nylon threads. I would have to jump up to a pretty heavy, like a 280 or something, which would add a whole lot of bulk to my fly. And what's nice about this is a spool of the Semperfi Nano Silk, but it's equivalent to it, and they call it Nano Silk. It's a gel spun thread. It's really, I don't know if there's any Semperfi people out there, they might quibble with this, but I don't really see a great deal of difference between this and the GSP that UTC markets. This is GSP 100, which is a pretty good weight to do most bass bugs. If you can find it, UTC makes a 130 in white, but it's hard to find. I don't know why. I mean, they have it. You can get shops to special order it, but you don't need to. If you go order just 100, that's going to work fine. The other thing you got to do, because the thread is so slippery, is you have to use some Zap-A-Gap. And by doing a little zap, let's see if I can, and you don't do a lot. I like these little ones that have the brush rather than the bottles. These things always if I actually use an entire bottle before the top freezes on me, especially when I travel with them. Come on, get out of there. There we go. Okay, so you don't need very much. What I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna put a little bit on this hook shank. Set that aside, and I'm gonna come and I'm gonna wrap my gel spun back through that glued section, and that's gonna lock it in place pretty well. So I'm gonna go ahead and start the tying thing now. What I'm gonna do, I want to show you guys, everybody, I don't know if it's all guys, I want to show you
Tim,
how to-
before you move away from the thread,
uh-huh.
I just
Go ahead.
wanted, and I apologize, I'm gonna add a spotlight real quick.
Yeah, go ahead. No,
Got this, let me just get it up in the camera.
there it is.
UTC GSP, and I bought it because I, wanted to use it for different applications and be real strong thread that's not going to break. The brown, the black, the olive, they're colored by a waxy substance.
Oh,
Because I
really?
guess the GSP is not easily colored. It's not easily dyed. So it's actually colored with like a waxy substance. So my bobbin tubes were just after using like half of a spool of this, the bobbin tubes were like packed with this waxy brown and black substance. And so there were times where I would actually have clumps of the color coming out of my bobbin tube. And so what I would recommend on those, if you don't use, so one thing I will say is that Semperfli does have some colored threads and they don't seem to have that problem.
Okay.
UTC, the way they color their threads, it does seem to be more waxy. And so if you're going to try the GSP in UTC, go with white and try to color it with a Sharpie or something where give it a little bit of time to dry and then do it that way. So if you need a black thread, you can use a black Sharpie, and they have all different colors of Sharpies. But use white GSP if you're using the UTC, the cheaper stuff. But Semperfli has a lot of really good colors, and I have not seen any of those bleed any color off into the bobbin tube.
What?
So
what
that's
is
just a point that I
This-
wanted to add in there before you got away from the thread.
Yeah, the Semperfli that I have is nice thread. I like it. It was given to me at the show. Jeff Raleigh gave it to me to try out, and so I've been tying with it. I only have white GSP thread because I come back. Let me see. I can grab a fly here and show you. I always come back, and you can see the little pop of red on there. Let me see if I get the camera to focus.
Yep.
Well, you can see that little pop of red. It's not really in focus, I guess, but that little pop of red, I come back and I finish out all of my bass bugs with a nylon thread, and that way I can pick whatever color I want, and it overwraps the GSP thread, just making it a little more secure. And then I coat it. You'll see later I coat it with some Sally Hansen's Hard as Nails. Any other thread questions or comments before I move on here?
I was just gonna ask Mike, what weight of UTC are you using? I mean, not UTC, but I mean Semperfli. Sorry, that's a distraction.
So the Semperfli, let me find it. The stuff that I use, this is not for bass bugs.
Oh, okay. Sorry, then we can go on. We can go
And
on.
the reason I'm saying that is, I think, and Tim could probably attest to this. If you're using a really strong thread like the Semperfli 12-aught, 50 denier, Nano Silk 50D, that stuff is very, very thin, but I have broken hooks with it. And so if you're using deer hair and you're trying to spin deer hair or flare deer hair, and there's different ways of making it. Like Tim uses on his stripes, tiger stripes and stuff on his bass bugs. You have to put a lot of pressure on the hair, and if you use too thin of a thread, strong as it may be, you will cut through the thread. The pithy, like Tim was saying, that it's not necessarily hollow. It has like cells. It's like more like like a foam inside of the hair. There's air pockets inside the hair, but if you really crank on it with a really thin thread, you're just going to have hair flying all over the place because it's going to cut right through it.
Yeah.
And some of that you can get by with if you get used to what thread you have, if
Yeah.
you just one type of thread. But Tim could probably talk more to what he uses, would be more important. What I use the nano silk for is mainly for smaller flies, so I don't build bulk, and I can tie down tight, mainly for like Elk Hair Caddis, other things like that. And again, you gotta have to be careful on those. But it's for smaller flies, so I don't build bulk, and that's why I use it.
Yeah. I never do it at the shows, but I tie all my little, because I live here, I'm in the Roaring Fork Valley, and where I used to guide here was on the frying pan. So we have a tailwater up here, the frying pan. And then, the guys in Denver who are fishing the South Platte and stuff, those are all tailwaters. If you've ever watched Pat Dorsey tie or seen any of his books, he ties really tiny flies. A lot of those guys are using like a 14-aught GSP because it is so thin. It doesn't build up bulk when they're tying these little, I don't tie quite as small as some of the Denver guys do. 22s are probably about as small as I go, which is still really tiny. But that's when I pull out that 14-aught GSP. And the reason is because, like you said, Mike, it's strong, but it's really small. It doesn't build up bulk. And yeah, if you tried that really ultra light GSP, I'm sure, I've never attempted it, but I've no doubt it would cut through the deer hair. I know I've experienced the same thing with Kevlar, and I know there are a few guys out there who spin and do hair with Kevlar. What I found with Kevlar was it just seemed like the thread was really sharp. Like if I pulled too tight, it was like a knife going through the hair. And the GSP is, I think, a little bit softer thread. Anyway, okay. Any other thread comments before I move on? Okay. So what I want to demonstrate for you first is a little hopper head. So let me get my camera back down here, and let's see if I can get it to focus. There we go. I think it
Possibly a Latort hopper.
Well, you know me. I love Latort hoppers. They're classic old patterns, and they are a great bluegill bug and all that. I tie a lot. I do tie and fish a lot of them. I tie them on light wire hooks, and I tie them as cricket patterns too. I like those old classic flies. I'm not somebody who's out trying to invent the latest, greatest, thing. I kind of like to go to the traditional stuff a little more often. That's not to say I don't have foam hopper patterns in my box. I do, but I kind of appreciate some of the older patterns. I kind of, my beginning fly fishing days, when I started reading Fly Fisherman magazine, I don't know if these names will mean anything to you guys, but Vince Marinero, Charlie Fox, Ernie Schwiebert, all those guys are the guys I was reading, and Ed Shank, all those Pennsylvania anglers, those were the guys writing back in those days. And so I am kind of partial to some of that old school stuff, So yeah, so anyway, what I'm going to show you right now would be a technique that would be used for a deer hair, hopper head. And the thing I want to really, hopefully I really get across here, this is not complicated. I'm serious. This is not complicated. This is easy. So the first thing I want to show you, I'll just show you real quick here. Whenever you go into a patch of hair, use your tips of your scissors and pull up the hair you want to clip off, and you clip it right at the skin. Okay, so I'm going to come in here and I'm going to get a little bunch of hair. And so here's this bunch, you can see it. And so the first thing I'm going to do, because this is going to be a hopper head. So let me back this up a little bit. So I'm going to comb out the underfur. And so you can see there's the fuzzy underfur that deer have. And then I'm going to take it, and I got a stacker here. I'm going to put it in my stacker. And I'm going to stack it. Okay. And now I'm going to take it. And so this is going to become my deer hair collar. All right. So I'm going to switch hands. I don't want this. There's a whole lot of stuff there. I don't really need all that. So I'm going to cut it down a little bit. Okay. Now here's the way to do this. Okay. All you need to do is push it down on the hook shank like that. Just push it on the hook shank. Now come and get 2 wraps of thread around it and flare it in place. And there you go. That's all you need to do. You do not need to spin the hair around the hook shank. Even if you got a body behind it, you can shove that hair down there and make it flare and then pull it back, tighten up on it a little bit and pull it. Here's another thing about deer hair too. We put 1 wrap of thread in there, tighten up just a little bit. Here's another thing about deer hair too. Unless you have a purpose for wanting to spread the hair out, you know, there's that whole idea of winding the thread through the hair. No, don't do that unless you purposely want to spread the hair out. But pretty much everything I do, I will pull it back. I put a little bit of tension on my thread and I bring it to the front and I wrap it in the front. And so I haven't wrapped a bunch of hair through there. Okay. So that's one technique. And it's really an easy technique for doing all kinds of, you could, even if you're doing like a little caddis head, where you got a little flared wing and you want a little flared head on it, deer hair head on it, whatever. That's just a very quick and easy way to put some deer hair on. And that's the way I do pretty much all my hopper heads. I mean, they're not going to be big heads, so I don't need to add a bunch of stacks and stuff to the hair. I'm going to demonstrate the next technique. Now, this is one that takes some touch. And I'll kind of see if we can make it work here. So same thing, I'm not going to stack this. Also, you'll see me do this a lot. I've got the hair here in my hand like this. I'm going to turn it over. I'm going to trim top and bottom. And now I've got this little trimmed out piece of hair. Okay, now what I'm going to do, this is what I think everyone traditionally thinks of as spinning deer hair. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to come through here, pull that hair back. I'm going to come in here. I'm going to get 3 wraps of thread on it. Okay. Then as it flares, you can see it's beginning to flare. As it flares, I'm going to let go of it as it goes around, and it's going to go around the hook shank. And it rotated around that one rotated around 1 time and came to a stop. That's good. Sometimes it'll go 1.5, 2 times. Here is the whole thing about doing this. Coming around, you have to have consistent pressure coming around. You want to maintain contact with the hook shank and keep the pressure consistent all the way around with the thread. Okay. And then you just keep chasing it around, and it should, after a rotation or 2, it'll lock. It'll suddenly stop. And when it stops, that's because it's evenly distributed itself around the hook shank. Okay. That move, that takes some practice of feeling that pressure coming around the hair. Okay. But that's what I think people traditionally think of as spinning deer hair. So let me just come in here. I'm not going to, normally I would glue this gel spun. I'm not going to do this because it's not a real fly. Let me get a few wraps there and just throw, you know what? Let me do this. We'll just make it easier. I'll just do my half hitch. Do a couple half hitches. Okay, and then I'm just going to come in here and I'll just go bump, just kind of trim around. like so. And I could get picky with it, but you get the idea.
It's amazing.
Well, there's your hopper head. There it is. So, you know, don't make these more complicated than they need to be. And, you know, the thing is you don't need to have these perfectly trimmed hopper heads, you know, just as long as it's kind of evenly distributed around. I'll show you one other little trick with this. Right now, you can see the butts are flowing in. If you want a more of an articulated head, if you grab the tips and get them out of the way and come in here and just do some little trims, you get this nice little, more of an articulated head on it. So just whatever kind of look you want to your fly. I don't think I have yet to encounter the trout that says, oh, you didn't articulate your head. I don't think I want to eat that hopper. So I don't think it matters one way or the other how you actually do it. But it just, you know, whatever look you want to have to your fly. Sometimes I'll do it, sometimes I don't. I just leave them. But you know, there it is. It's just rough trimmed. And that's it. So that's a hopper head. So you guys have any questions on that little technique? Okay, cool. All righty.
I've never seen it done quite that easily. That's
Well, I
fought,
think a lot of people think, oh, I got to spin this hair around the hook shank. No, you don't have to spin it around the hook shank. Just shove it on the hook shank, get a couple wraps, pull it. The pressure of and here's one of the things about it. Those 2 or 3 wraps you do, make them loose wraps so that the thread is gathering the hair together as it tightens around the hook shank, and that will help distribute the hair all the way around the hook shank.
I tie a fly that Don Peterbaugh taught me how to tie called the mini muddler minnow. And I've fought with that bullet head more time. I've been fighting with it for 30 years. I think now I finally figured out how to do it. Thank you.
That's how to do it. And I think a lot of people overcomplicate those deer hair heads, especially if you're tying like if you're tying like a cone head, you know, Madonna streamer that it's a Kelly Gallup pattern and stuff. Geez, that hair is just rough as heck. You just shove it down in there, give it a couple wraps and bang, and then trim it out just a little bit. I mean, you don't have to be fancy with it, you know, I mean, and so that is the technique that I think for muddlers and for hoppers and all that just really works great. So,
and I think, John, you bring up a really good point. Especially with muddlers, when I did the demo on the muddler, when Gapin tied the muddler, it was scraggly and had a few butt hairs, you know, by butt hairs, I mean the butts of the deer hair sticking out. And it wasn't a, you know, perfectly packed, you know, like a bass bug or whatever. It was a scraggly head, and it was intended to represent a sculpin minnow. But
yeah,
the key is, I think, even on some hopper heads and stuff, if you have a few little gaps between the deer hairs, I think you have the flotation of the deer hair, but then you also have some bubbles that form when that fly hits the water. You've got some bubbles in there that float that fly. If you tightly pack that hopper head and it hits the water a few times, you've got water inside between those tightly packed deer hairs, and that thing's going to sink like a rock. If you have a little bit of air gap in there, any false cast or even back cast is going to flick the hair out of that. So I think there's like a happy medium between, you don't want a really loose head, but you don't want a tightly packed head, because you want that to be able to land on the water and be able to support itself on the surface foam. So that's just my theory about hopper heads anyway. Deer hair bass bugs, I mean, I've seen some amazing ones, and I showed the picture of one of Tim's flies that he gave me when I was at the Denver show. It looks like styrofoam, and I'm sure that thing is going to float like a cork on the water. It's beautiful, and I think the difference in a hopperhead, because you've got all that other stuff going on, I think you really just need to focus, or a muddler. I think you just need to focus on the shape, and especially with a muddler, that's intended to be a minnow that floats, that sinks below the surface. So you don't want it to float on the top. You want it to
In
sink.
fact, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
In fact, you don't need to comb out the underfur to make hair flare. If you're doing a muddler head, don't comb it out. Leave it in, leave the underfur in there. You can still flare the hair with the underfur in there, and the underfur will help soak up water. So on my muddler heads and any of those type of sculpin deer hair patterns that I use deer hair for, I don't comb out the underfur. I leave the underfur in the hair. And you're right. I take, especially if it's meant to be a bait fish pattern, those heads are much loose. You don't want to pack a tight head on a streamer pattern. You want it to be loose. In fact, I've seen musky guys now. One of the things I just saw, some beautiful flies at the Midwest show and in Salt Lake. There's actually, surprisingly enough, a really good musky fly tire in Salt Lake City. And they're actually doing brushes of deer hair, but they're spreading it out. So when they wrap it, it's really loose, but it pushes a lot of water and it makes a great head. So you're absolutely right. You do not want these tightly packed heads. Yeah. Anything else on muddler, hopper heads? Anything else?
Yes, sir. Now, when you pull, you're pulling towards you. You're not pulling up or to the side. You do your 3 gathering wraps, and then you pull towards you to get it to flare. Correct?
Yeah, I do.
Okay.
I do pull towards me. It does that is up to you how you pull. You can pull down the direction you pull. I don't think matters that much. Whatever you're comfortable pulling. Although I do know, actually, you're going to see me pull down on the bass bugs when I start stacking on top. I pull down because if I pull this way, the hair is going to want to rotate. And so I'm going to pull down. When I jump into one of these bass bugs here, you'll see that for those, I actually pull down as I put the hair when I do the hair work. Anything else, or we want to move on?
Yeah, I want to see you do one of those bass bugs. Those are things of art.
Okay. Let's do one. And what I've done, I've prepared a couple tails. You can go, if we have time later and you want me to knock out a tail, I've got some feathers here to do it. I'll tell you a little about the tail though first. Because I'm this designed fly, let me pull one off my thing here. This fly design here, let me refocus my camera. This has been around for ages. This particular configuration of a popping bug for bass. Peck and Paw, what are some of the other companies? Paw Company, I don't know. There's a bunch of companies back in the 20s and 30s. In fact, from my reading and some of the stuff I've read, prior to World War II, bass fishing was done as much with a fly rod as anything else. And it was the spinning reel that came along that suddenly kind of gave fly fishing for bass a back seat. But this style popping bug with the feather tail, these aren't done. I'm going to add eyes and legs to them. I'll do that on one of these flies later. It's been around a long time, but the tail, I've done some things in the tail, and I'm not saying this is unique by any means. I don't know if it is or it isn't, but it's some intentional design that I want this fly to do some things. And I want it to do mainly one thing. When it hits the water, I want stuff that move around without me having to move the bug. And so the center of the tail is stuff like chickaboo, whiting superboo, or you could use some marabou type material. The thing I like about chickaboo and the superboo is the feathers taper a little more. Turkey marabou tends to be pretty blunt. It kind of fills in bigger. This stuff kind of tapers. The other thing is you want to pick a feather for, I don't know if you want to consider this a wing or legs or whatever. You want a very webby feather. And this particular feather on the outside here happens to be a whiting black laced hen, and it comes from the cape, not the saddle. The saddle feathers are really short and round. The cape feathers are nice and long, but you can see how webby that is. The other one I use, I'll put another tail in here and show you. The other one I use is the whiting hen. That's a grizzly dyed hen. And I backed it with, if you look, I've got it in front of a black laced hen. That this feather by itself, if I can hold it up here, doesn't have quite the same webbing in it, but it's still really nice. And especially when you combine, but you want feathers in the tails that have a good web, because otherwise they get wet and they turn to a stem and there's like nothing there. And then the hackle collar is all whiting American. And if you look at those feathers, you bend a feather, it doesn't have a lot of webbing in it. It's a great feather for hackling. So there's really three types of feather. They're all chickens, but there's three types of feathers in the tail. The center one just adds a little texture, a little movement to the fly, and it helps it kind of gives me a little place to splay out the legs on. And then the collar just builds a nice transition. What I don't like about deer hair bass bugs, and I don't know that it matters to the fish, but it matters to me, I guess, maybe aesthetically or whatever. I want a bug that even once it gets wet, it has a nice taper to it. Because the truth is, I think most of it, whatever color your bug is, anything, the primary, especially where I fish up in the Midwest, up in Michigan, the primary forage for bass are all the little bait fish, the little bluegill and all the little bait fish that are in the lake. And I think these bass bugs, whatever they look like, whatever color they are, they're taking them for a little struggling bait fish in the surface. And so I want that fly to taper and not just have like a big body and just like a nothing tail, like just there's nothing there.
Yeah. Would you use schlappen for that where you have the hackle there? Because that's one thing that seems to be pretty cheap nowadays.
Yeah.
A lot of people use
Yeah.
schlappen. There aren't a lot of spay flies and stuff like that there.
Anything that will separate out like this,
And
you
be
can
webby.
use. And yeah, well, you can use, for these feathers back here, especially on some of my bigger ones. Let me see. I don't think I did use schlappen on these. Let me grab a box here and see if I can. This is not a, here, let me swap out here and I can show you. That's not schlappen, but I could have used schlappen in this one. This one is just this. One of the things I want to work on this summer, I want to try is topwater muskie. I haven't really, normally when I fish muskie, I have been stripping bait fish streamer type patterns for them. And I've been reading reading some different books and looking at some YouTube video stuff, and I'm seeing guys that are talking about throwing topwater in the summer for muskie. And so I knocked out a few really big ones here for muskie, and this is where like you could start use these feathers came right from the very top of the cape, but I could easily substitute schlappen for it too and get a nice long pattern there.
So have you caught any muskie?
I have only a few, not a lot. I have a chapter. I combined walleye, pike, and muskie into one chapter in my tactics book. And I fished enough for them that I have a nodding acquaintance with them. I don't have this kind of expertise, but I've had follows of fish that were, oh man, I know they were in the mid 40s. I mean, my God, they look like they're as big as my leg. We have caught muskie. There's a picture of my cousin in the book. That fish in the book is about a mid 30s, and I caught them right up to 40, but I haven't really gotten up into the mid to high 40s. And of course, I've never touched a really big one, a big 50
On a
inch.
fly rod?
Yes, on a fly rod.
Oh my God.
Yes, fly rod.
Hey,
my
They're
dad,
fun.
my
They're
dad and I
fun.
fished for muskie all of his life and all of my life, and they say the fish of a 10,000 casts, and I guess I haven't cast 10,000 times yet for him. So
Oh, well, I'm going to tell you what, the challenge with muskie, and I do love muskie fishing. The challenge with muskie, I'll tell you a story from the summer. We were on Emily Lake, which is in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, over in the western side, which is one of the well-known muskie lakes in Michigan. And we had been stripping streams all day. I was with a friend of mine, and we were swapping back and forth. The thing about muskie is you can't let your brain go into auto mode. You have to stay alert, even after a half a day of casting and not seeing anything, because they follow it. I'm quite certain I understand now what this fish did. It was a nice sized fish. I don't know. I don't want to speculate as to how big it was, but it was a pretty big mouth that I saw coming out after the fly. But I think what it was doing was it was following my fly below it and behind it, and I didn't see it. And I was stripping the fly, and I got into the point, and I started to lift the fly off the water. Well, of course, what did the fly do? It started to speed up and head to the surface, which triggered the muskie. And all I saw was a gaping maw of teeth coming out of the water, chasing it. And I very accurately and successfully was able to take the fly right out of the fish's mouth. And of course, he wasn't coming back after that. So, it's the challenge is spending a day of fishing and staying focused. And then the other thing I've learned is you better, even if you don't think there's a fish following, you better finish every cast with at least one little move, push the rod in the water and get one little move, a little L-shaped or some kind of a little move on the fly to, if the fish is following, give them a chance to come and eat it. But anyway, that's my muskie story.
Hey, Tim,
yeah. So Schlapen, I all started from talking about Schlapen.
yeah. Hey, Tim,
Okay.
I wanted to introduce our buddy from Australia, Paul Fidelis. He's a retired Marine who lives in Australia. And since they don't have Project Healing Waters in Australia, we took him in as our own. So he's part of the Omaha Healing Waters, as far away from Australia as you could possibly be from either way around the world. But
what kind of fishing? What kind of fishing do you have in Australia?
Sorry?
What kind of fishing do you have in Australia?
We've got saltwater bass and all the saltwater fish, and then in the high mountains there are actual trout. And unfortunately, we're inundated with carp. A lot of the rivers have just got so much carp.
Unfortunately, carp are a lot of fun to catch. Have you
Yeah,
ever
not
caught
when
one?
they're. Used to go to a place we called it the Carp Bash, and you stayed there in the lake, and you burley with bread, and you start fishing on Friday, and you fish till Sunday morning at 12 o'clock. You catch between 50 and 100 of them, and when you leave, there'd be just as many carp in the water as when you started. There was 80 guys. We filled up trailer loads of carp.
Wow.
Because in Australia, you can't put them back. They're not considered a noxious species, so when you catch one, you have to leave it.
Have to take it out.
Yeah.
Yeah. I actually I have a smallmouth river I fish in Michigan that has carp in it too. And so when I get to the deeper holes, I switch over and I can bump my crayfish patterns down through a deeper hole, and oftentimes I'm rewarded with a nice. In fact, if you look in my book, you'll see a picture of that one carp I'm holding. came from the Pine River, and it was a day of smallmouth fishing, but I came up on this deep hole alongside of the bank, and I knew there was some carp down in it. And that's where that fish came from. Okay, should we move on with deer hair bass bugs?
Yeah.
You ready
Well,
for that?
I got a question since you fish for muskie and I'm after walleye in Stone Lake and I've seen your thing. I ended up coming up with, I bought a special from Kelly Gallus. I came up with a little predator pack. You think those will have good enough feathers to use for like bass bugs and longer bugs, I think?
Ask me one more time. I'm having a little hard time you weren't coming through real clear for me.
Yeah,
Oh,
Bill,
okay.
your audio is a little weak.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, my headset fell off. I'm sorry. I got a predator pack from Kelly Gallup that I bought myself for Christmas. Kind of like red and olive green. I think that'll work for long enough feathers for kind of like some of the bigger predatory species.
Yeah. Here's my thing about walleye. Walleye are not hard to catch if
Uh-huh.
you can get to them. If you can get to them. The thing about walleye is, especially in the summer, they're deep water fish. So
Yeah.
if you're fishing a body of water where they can escape to deep water, that's where they're going to be, which is why so many people, fish, jigs and stuff like that deep for them. You got to find them in a spot where they can't escape to shallow water. If you look at that one walleye I caught, you'll notice in the book, I'm standing alongside a pond, and the deepest section of the pond is about 12 feet deep, and it was stocked walleye. So I was able to get in there and put some little, I think that came to a little white clouser, is just a little minnow, little streamer minnow patterns. They'll eat them. So you either got to find them at the right time of year, like when they're up shallow in the earlier part of the year, or you got to find them in locations where you can put a fly in front of them. Because, if you're fishing 30, I mean, who's going to fish 30, 40 feet of water with a fly rod? I mean, maybe you could, but, it'd be, I don't know, you'd be trying to prove a point rather than fishing efficiently, I guess. I don't know. Yeah, but that's the thing about walleye. I threw walleye in there because they're kind of an interesting species, and they're fun to. But I will say this about walleye in Michigan, and I don't say this about any other fish, but when we catch walleye, we bonk them on the head and they become dinner because they're really good eating.
Yeah, well, I catch them in Storm Lake, so that's why I just asked the question. We're a shallow lake, but I'm learning. Thank you, sir. I'm gonna play.
Yeah, that's my take on walleye. Is you got to get, if you can get a fly in front of them, they'll probably eat it. Okay, so I talked about the tail, and so just to let me pull this out for a moment, and this will give you an idea of where I'm going with this fly. Where is it? Oh, here it is. So this is the fly that I'm going to tie. You can see the spots. You can see the black little rings around the spots. And it's got a white belly. The back, I will say this about this particular pattern, the back colors and all that don't mean a thing to the fish. Not one whit. In fact, I could just tie the entire thing white, maybe the yellow. I don't know. Maybe the yellow adds a little bit. You can see it, some white bleeding down into the belly on it. But this is the fly I'm going to tie. So let's put this in here, and let's go ahead and let's tie a bass bug. So the first thing I'm going to do, I don't want to, I got this tail and this collar. I don't want to cut that off. So I'm going to pull this back, and I'm going to put a thread band around this. I'm going to I'll cut this band off after I trim this fly out.
What thread are you using right now?
This is just a UTC 140 wax thread. This thread makes absolutely no difference. All you're doing is you're creating a thread band, and you want to pull your tailing materials out of the way so that when you come and you start doing the trimming and all that on the deer hair, you don't accidentally trim off your collar and stuff. So all I'm doing is sweeping everything back and getting it out of the way.
All right, sorry, I jumped the gun.
Yeah, no, that's all. That's fine. No, you can't jump the gun here. Just whenever you got a question, fire away. So the thread itself doesn't matter. Now I'm going to take my Zap-A-Gap, and I'm just going to put a little bit right there at the beginning. And gonna come and take this happens to be, normally I'd be using UTC 130. This happens to be that Nano Silk, Semperfi Nano Silk. Okay, so one of the things I'm gonna do, so you can see I got the thread is there and it's good and tight. I'm gonna do a thread base. And you can build a thread base as you go, or you can do a whole thread base. Probably I'm going to have to, maybe I'm going to have to add thread base. So why am I putting a thread base on? I'm putting a thread base on because of a couple reasons. One, I'm going to use a little of this Fly Right cement. Let me get it in the can. There we go. Fly Tight cement made by the Fly Right company. I have it in a little needle bottle. I'm going to put that in at the base of the clumps of hair. And I think that, well, the glue definitely makes the body a little tougher. And I think the thread kind of wicks it back. But the main reason is, as I build this, I'm going to come in with my packing tool and I'm going to compress it. And by having this thread base, it makes it really easy for those stacks of hair to slide back against one another on the hook shank. Okay. Now this particular fly, I'm not using, it's a bass bug. It's with the collar. I'm not stacking and using a collar like I would, say, on a Dalbert diver or something. So I'm using some white belly hair. I've got some yellow belly hair, and I'm going to do these little accents of black around some little bars of gray. So that's kind of my scheme. The other thing I'm going to say right off the top here is, you could just throw some hair on here, do a quick trim. If it moved water in a lake for largemouth bass, the bass would eat it. Okay. What I'm doing doesn't repel bass. It's not making the fly less fishy, but if I'm only looking to tie something and I appreciate people that, my flies are meant to catch fish. I don't want to spend more time on them than I have to. I appreciate that mentality. I don't have any, that's fine. For me, the bass bugs are kind of a little piece of artwork in a way, or at least a little piece of craftsmanship, whatever. I like them to look a certain way, and I'm kind of fussy about that, but I also want them to catch fish. So, you'll see what I do here with them. So I'm going to, get started and just show you how I do it. So again, I got my clump of hair, my white. This is going to be my belly hair. And this first thing I'm going to show you, this is the one, this is the thing. This, if you want to tie these bass bugs, this is the thing you have to learn how to do. I want to take this clump hair and I want to put it on the bottom of the hook shank. So here's how I'm going to do it. I'm going to lay it in here to 45. I'm going to come in here with 2 wraps of thread. Okay, now here's the trick with this. Taika Watch said, notice when see how the hair just begins to flare? It's just right there where that thread tension is right there where it's wanting to start to flare the hair. Don't go past that, because if you go past that, it's going to want to distribute itself around the hook shank like we did on that hopper pattern. Okay, you want to take it right there, but no farther. And then the third wrap just pushes it to the bottom of the hook shank like that. And you notice the hair hasn't gone anywhere. It's staying in that loop because that loop is right there at that tension. Then you just put your thumb on it and you flare it. Okay. And you can see that all that hair went to the bottom of the hook shank. And that's the move. Okay. I'm going to do another one and I'll show you how I do it again. I'll describe it again. Okay. Now I'm going to take some yellow hair. Now the rest of it is really not that hard, because I'm just laying this hair right on top of the hook shank. I'm going to come in here, 2 wraps, hold it in place and flare it. So I got a little bunch on the top. Okay. And I want to hold it. If I don't hold it, it's going to want to rotate away from me. Okay. Then I'm going to come and I'm going to take, this is going to be the little black ring. So I just take a little tiny bit of this black. I don't want too much. And whatever you want to do, you don't have to do black rings on them. This is where your creativity of what you want your fly to look like comes into play, how you want the spot. You just I could put a whole clump of black in there, then I'd have black spots. I could just put the gray in there. or I could do the black with the gray in the middle, which is what I'm going to do. So there's, however you want your fly to look. So again, do that. Now what I do is I put my finger in and I separate out that space. Okay, now I'm going to come and I'm going to get a little bit of gray here. And now here's one of the things you want to be careful of as you do these is don't get too much hair. The hair wants to kind of evenly distribute itself around. And if you get too much hair on the top, there begins to be so much more hair. That's why you see the yellow bleeding in around the sides. That's the hair wanting to distribute evenly around the hook shank. So as you come up, kind of be aware of collectively how much hair you've been putting in. And what'll happen if you get too much sometimes is the spots will want to slip. They'll kind of, because they want to evenly distribute itself around the hook shank. So as you build this, you're not using big giant chunks of hair. So I'm going to flare that in place. And now that's flared in place. I don't need those big long hairs there. So now you can see I've got the gray spot with the black. Okay, now another thing I want to emphasize is all of my thread wraps have stayed right here through that same plane. Okay, I haven't come forward through the hair. Just like with the hopper head, I'm not coming forward or backward or anything through the hair. Every wrap came right in that same plane, and that's real important. You don't want to wrap forward through the hair. Now, here's the other, I'm going to show you another move here that you want to kind of think about when you're doing this. It's not unusual if you start spinning deer hair bass bugs, it's not unusual to find that your thread has grabbed a little piece of hair and folded it over, and you got this little folded over piece of hair sitting in the body of your bug. It's not the end of the world. It doesn't affect the fishability of the fly at all. But just from an aesthetic point, you want to try to, minimize that because the bug just looks a little nicer. Well, here's one of the things that will help you do that. You pull the hair back, put some tension on this thread, and then work it to the front and get a couple wraps on the front. If you put some tension on the thread and work it up through the hair, because oftentimes that's the move that catches a little bit of the two things that do that is not following that same plane with the thread as you go around and you're putting your stacks and stuff in, you stray a little bit off that plane. That's one thing that folds hair. The other thing that folds hair is when if you pull this through and it's loose, it might grab a little chunk of hair as you pull it up and then it might fold it as it's coming. So if you keep some tension on it and bring it to the front, that will help not have the folded over hair. And so I'm going to go ahead, my very technical, expensive half hitch tool. And actually, I kind of joke about it, but quite frankly, this is the best thing you can use. Why? It's long. Because if you're tying longer flies, it goes back. I found the nice brass ones and stuff that you can buy in fly tying shops. Typically, they're meant for trout flies. They're not long enough, and this is just like a cheap pen cap. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring my thread. I'm going to bring my thread forward a little bit. So you can see where my thread is at. I got a little bit of hook shank between that back bundle. Now I'll do that bottom piece again. I'll show you doing the bottom. Comb out this bunch. Come in, trim it. Okay, one more time. Here we go. Lay it in here to 45. I'm going to come in. I'm get 2 wraps of thread around it. Okay, now here's the trick. See right there. See that hair start to move? That's the tension you want. If you go past that, the hair starts to distribute around the hook shank. If you're too loose, when you go to roll the bundle of hair to the bottom, the hair will slide around and it won't roll under the to the bottom as a nice neat group. So that is the total thing to this move, is getting that right thread tension. Now when I come and I push that over, see it pushed over nice and neat, it's staying together as a bundle. Then I put my thumb on it, pull down, And as those thread wraps tighten up, it flares on the bottom of the hook shank. So did that help demonstrate again? There are questions on that one before
So
I move
Tim,
on?
you put your thumb on the clump on your side of the hook.
Right, because here's what would happen. If I didn't put my thumb on it and I pulled that hair down, that hair would want to rotate around the hook shank. Even though I got it on the bottom, if I pulled it down, it would start to move on me. By putting my thumb right here and forcing it to stay on the bottom, I pull down, that whole clump stays on the bottom.
Got it. Thank you.
Does that make
Just as you
sense?
moved your yep. Just as you moved your fingers, I saw how your thumb was pressing down top, and yeah, there you go. That's the piece I was missing.
Oh, I'm sorry. I probably had my hand in the way, didn't I? Because I was looking
the
at my
finger.
phone.
Yeah, I mean, yeah.
Yeah, that's what I do right there. I just do
Okay.
that. A lot of times, well, here's why I blocked it. A lot of times I put my thumb. Okay, so I put my thumb, see if I can show you this. I put my thumb here and I bring my index finger and I hold the front of the hook shank because I'm pulling up on the hook shank to help support it as I'm pulling down on the thread. Does that make sense?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, it sure
Okay.
does. Yeah, got it.
That's what I'm doing. That's why I'm sorry. I didn't even look at my monitor. That's why I'm blocking because I put my thumb here, I put my finger there, then I pull down and I'm supporting that hook shank so I'm not bending that hook shank down. Okay, now I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to add some of my glue. This is where I normally would add my glue, and I'll push a little back into that clump behind it. Just put a little glue right in there. And
What do you use for glue?
this is the Fly Tight cement. Let me get
Oh,
it
right.
here.
You said that earlier. Yeah.
There we go. There it is. It's made by a company in Michigan. I think it's still out there. What's interesting about it, it is, you can see it is thinned with denatured alcohol, which is non-toxic. And the biggest thing about it is it dries flexible. That's the thing. If you don't have a glue that dries flexible, especially if you take like an old style head lacquer, something like that, stuff that dries hard, what happens is the glue bleeds up into the hair and it gets real thin, and then it creates a sharp edge. And as the hair works on that sharp edge, you can break hairs out of a fly. I've seen flies that has happened to before. So whatever glue you put in, it's better to not put glue in the base than to put a hard glue. You want a flexible glue. What's nice about this stuff is it stays flexible, but it also, I rarely have to thin it out. Unlike you'll see some of the other glues I use later. You have to, well, the Dave's Flex Cement, which is thin with toluene. Toluene evaporates out of it all the time. I have to keep adding it to it. Okay, let's go ahead and let's keep
Perfect.
going.
Thank you.
Let's go ahead and move along here and get this next one in here. And I'm gonna, if you have questions, jump in. I'm gonna kind of move a little faster now to I'm not doing anything different along the way here than I've already done. I'm just kind of repeating that pattern. And I'm looking to probably on this fly to maybe get 4 clumps of hair. Although right now after this one, we're going to talk a little bit about packing hair and about what to look for in packing hair. So flare it, push it back a little bit, bring this out to the front. Now I'm going to throw some half hitches in there. Okay, now here's why I'm throwing the half hitches in. Okay. So what I want you to do is I want you to imagine that my knuckle right here is the surface of the hook shank, and my fingers are the hair that's radiating off the hook shank. Okay. What you don't want to do is have a tool that comes in here and pushes like this. Because what you're like say this pen cap tool, say I push this pen cap tool on it. What you're doing then is you're trying to pull the clump of hair back. Okay. Instead, what you want is you want a tool that's going to come down and it's going to engage the hook shank, and it's going to be in front of those knots, and then pushes the hair along the hook shank like this. And you know it works because the hair suddenly is angled forward, okay? The hair is angled forward here a little bit now, but the tool I'm using, there's a lot of good tools. Let me see if, well, there's a brassy, I don't know, I've got one up here. I don't see it at the moment, but this is one that's made by a guy, Greg Stein in Texas. I discovered, I forgot even where did I see this tool? I fell in love with it and I order them from him now. Mike, if you want to get some of these, if there's some guys who express some interest in this, I can give you the information to get these. What I like about this tool is it feels very comfortable in my hand. I'm protected. I'm not sliding off from it. It's got a good grip on it. And yet, if you can look at it, one side, you can see one side has a little cutout in it. Let me point it right at the camera. The other side is flat, but the inside has a groove. I don't know if you kind of see the groove on the inside. So when I put it on the hook shank and I close it, that flat edge comes up and it's engaging the thread that goes around the hook shank. It's not engaging the hair. So now take a look at the hair right now and watch what happens. When I push back on it, notice how the hair really springs forward. That's because I've moved that pack of hair back along the hook shank. And so doing the half hitch and then having the right kind of tool. I've got, I don't even know in my set here, I've got these packing tools sitting in a drawer somewhere. All of them were these pen cap style. They kind of worked on the same ideas as pen cap, and none of them worked very well. So you got to have something that clamps and pushes. The brassy, which is a Chris Helm tool, works real well. And Pat Cohen did the one called a Fugly. It was really big though. I mean, I never was comfortable with it. If you got one and it works for you, great. I kind of felt like it was trying to do trim carpentry with a sledgehammer. I mean, it just was way overkill, and this tool is the one I really like. So yeah, Mike, if you want, we can talk later and I can, if your guys want to try to get some of those, I can give you some information about how to get them.
Yeah,
Okay.
I'll get in touch with you.
Okay. So any questions on packing? That all makes sense what I said? All right, then let's get moving on this thing. So once again, here's the bottom. So 2 wraps, I'm right there where it's just about ready to flare. I roll it to the bottom, put my thumb on it. I'm going to come here and grab with my finger, hold that and flare. So that was what I looked in the monitor that time. I think you guys could see what I did there. Add a little bit of glue to it. Then grip my yellow hair. By the way, all this stuff, well, you'll have this recording to refer to, but I also have several up on my YouTube channel. I've got this stuff too. And of course, it's in my book.
Tim, can you give me, what is the name of your YouTube channel?
If you just go into YouTube and you type in Tim Jacobs Fly Fishing, you'll pop into it.
Okay.
And then you can subscribe to it. If any of you guys are on Facebook, you can friend me on Facebook, because typically what I will do when I put out a new video is I'll put a time lapse of it on Facebook. And you can watch, I try to keep the time lapse to about 1.5 minutes, 2 minutes. So it's pretty quick. You can see what the fly looks like. And then if you want the longer, more instructional piece for it, I have a link in Facebook that takes you out to my YouTube channel to do the instructional one, because not everybody wants to sit through the instructional. The time lapse are, I don't know, I guess they're kind of fun to watch. It's like it goes and there's a fly, it's kind of interesting to watch them. All right. So yeah, I think I've got enough space there. This is where it starts to get tricky. You know, I've done 3 stacks. And I think I'm going to now, one of the things you got to do as you get to the end is now you got to start gauging, okay, how much hair can I put in here? And I'm going to have to back off a little bit on the amount of hair because the space right here, see if you can see it. Let me rotate it. There's the space on the hook shank that I have left. It's not a lot of space. Sometimes all I do is I'll just maybe like on this fly, I'd take a piece of some white, put it on the bottom, put some yellow on top and call it good. And this is close to being one of those flies. It just depends on how big, you know, how big a clumps you select as you go forward. Let's put some white on here and then I'll take a look at it and decide what I want to do. And, you know, like I said, the number of spots and whatnot, that's all irrelevant to how the fish flies. Or I'm sorry, how the fly fishes. 2, 3, and this is where it gets tricky. You gotta catch that hook shank. Yeah, I think I'm just gonna put a clump of yellow. I'm not gonna try to add another spot to it. We'll lay that in there. And you got to make sure you come around and get that hook shank down below. Get a couple wraps in there and just flare it in place. Yep, I think that will do the trick. So now I'll come out here and throw a couple half hitches in it again. And yeah, that's not bad. That's you know, the standard for, you know, normally the standard, see if I can get it where you guys can see this. The standard, I don't know, I'm having a hard time looking at my monitor here. My fingers keep getting in the way. There, you can kind of see it now. Let me get some of that hair out of the way. The standard for a thread head on really any flies, the kind of the tying standard is the diameter of the hook eye should be about the size of the thread head. It's kind of what you're shooting for. And I'm pretty much there, I think. So now what I've got to do, just like I started this thread with Zap-A-Gap, I've got to finish it with Zap-A-Gap. And come in here and just wrap it in there and then just throw a couple half hitches on top of it.
So you put the Zap-A-Gap on the thread, right?
Yeah, don't try to stick the Zap-A-Gap down in here because you'll just turn the hair into a messy clump. Just all I gotta do is get the thread wet a little bit. And like I said, when I finish this fly, I'm gonna come back, I'm gonna put a wax nylon thread head on it, and then I'm gonna saturate it with some Sally Hansen's Hard as Nails. That'll help lock everything in place.
So Tim, you don't really have to worry about catching hairs in the whip finish because when you're finished, you're just gonna kind of carve that back anyway, right?
You know, I know like Chris Helm, I've watched Chris Helm tie. A lot of guys, they'll take these little pieces of plastic and put a hole in them and push it back and wrap the thread and all that. I just pulled the thread back and I don't know, I just get it out of the way. I mean, yeah, once in a while I'll have a piece of hair that might get caught, but I don't know that. I mean, I was like, I was going to say that gets a little too fussy for me, which seems a little ironic when I look at all the other stuff I do on this fly, but it's just a little fussier than I want to be. I feel I can
I've always thought of it as if I catch a few hairs in the whip finish, they're still going to kind of flare up and I'll just be able to.
You can get, you can get them out of there. That's not a problem. You can get them out of there. All right. So now let me get this stuff out of the way. Okay, so let me see. Do I have, where did I put this stuff? Okay, what I'm about to show you is not in the book. I wish it was, but it's not. If I don't know if I'll ever do a second edition of that book. If I do, I'll definitely add it. What I've done is I have a bunch of templates. I thought I had them sitting out here. I'm not seeing them at the moment. I don't want to go dig it. I just get a bunch of circle templates, ellipse templates, that kind of thing. And what I do is I look at the, kind of see the hook. It's buried with the hair right now, but I look at the diameter of the hook eye or the hook gate. And I create, this happens to be, you can see this is a little bit of an oval rather than a perfect circle. It doesn't matter, by the way, to how these flies fish. You can make it a perfect circle or an oval. I want to make this oval. This is going to be a template. I'm going to push it on the front and I'm going to use it as a guide to trim out my initial trim in the body. And so I make this about 1 1/4 to maybe 1 1/3 times the hook gape. I want just a little bit bigger than the hook gape. And I'm going to pull, let me grab this here. I marked this page in my book. And if any of you guys want, just email me and I'm happy to send you this. If you don't, you don't need to buy the book. I just photocopy that page and send it to you. Let me get this out of the way. Okay, so that page right there has all the proportions for a bass bug. Okay, and there's some definite, now the patterns and all that stuff is like, yeah, that's for me and I like them and it looks nice and all that. The way the hook, the head is trimmed is really important. And if you notice in there, let me get close enough. Okay, if you look at the head, you can see that line B is on the hook shank. And you can see that line C is below the hook shank, and it's about 1/4 to 1/3 below the hook shank. So you're not trimming these bass bugs right, flat, and tight to the hook shank. And the reason you don't is because I treat the top of the head with floatant. But even with treating with floatant, eventually water will kind of soak up into that head. And eventually what happens if you have no deer hair on the bottom of the hook shank is the top of the head will outweigh the bend of the hook, which the bend of the hook is the only weight you have under the body. And so what happens is this fly will start landing upside down. And you don't want it to land upside down, okay? You want this fly, and again, I'll send that to anybody. Tim at timjacobsflyfishing.com. I will be happy to scan that and send it to you as a scan if you'd like me to. You want this fly, to land upright, because I can tell you right now, I mean, one of the advantages of fly fishing for these guys, and I see it, I mean, it happens like all the time. I cast this bug up into shallow water because basically largemouth bass on a lake are shallow water predators. Unless they're scared off the shore, especially early in the morning, they're up shallow and they'll stay shallow well into the day if there's not activity and stuff that pushes them to deeper water. A fly landing on the water in like 1.5 feet of water, they immediately they come look at it. I think guys who are really skilled with tossing like some kind of a lure or something can maybe make us, but a lure is just not going to land as soft. I'm not skilled at throwing bass plugs. But occasionally I hardly ever do it. I don't even know when the last time. I've got a bait casting rod and a few plugs that I'll occasionally go fish with. But I can tell you when I plug fish, the first move of the bass is away. Then I'll give it a pop. Then they may turn and come look at it. With a fly, they will immediately, I see them coming down the shore. They come right down the shore, they tip up and they look at it. Okay. Well, if you're sitting there messing with it and trying to get it to flip over and do all these unnatural moves, oftentimes they might not take it. Where if the fly is landed correctly and it's upright, and you got the tails moving around, you got the legs moving around. I mean, literally, you can just give it just a touch of twitch, just make it just quiver a little bit. That's all it needs. They'll just go, pull it in and you got a fish. I mean, it's just a quick little, so it's important that these things land upright. So back to my template, you'll notice the hole in my template, I've left some, I got some room down here that is about, you notice if you look at the total diameter here, that's maybe about a quarter of the way up. And so I'm going to put this template on the front of this like this, and this is what it looks like. So now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to come in here. I've also, this is another thing that's different from the book. In the book, I actually mentioned razor blade holders and went, I don't need these. Well, I've completely changed my tune. I love razor blade holders for this first step because it just makes trimming these, by using a template, it makes trimming them a lot quicker. In the book, what I did is I block them out and then I trim them out. And so each fly, it's really hard to make one fly to the next fly be the same. Where here, I get much more uniformity in the size flies. If you look at these patterns, you just kind of go around and you look at these, you'll notice from the size of the head, the sizes are all relatively consistent. They're not exact, but they're relatively consistent. And this template is what does that. So now I'm just going to come in here and maybe I need a new razor blade. I have been tying with this one. Let's see if this side. Yeah, I need a new blade.
Wilkinson, remember those razor blade names?
Yes. Razor blades, I was real worried for a while because they were starting to disappear. Let's see how there we go. That's what it should do. I used to go into places like, used to be able to get single double-edged razor blades in the grocery store. Then they disappeared out of the grocery store. Then I could get them in places like Walgreens. Well, they disappeared out of Walgreens. And I was starting to panic a little, oh no, these are going away. And then all of a sudden there's this resurgence in guys shaving with single edge, like double edged razor blades. And what I did is this group I'm using right here, I got on Amazon. And on Amazon, you can buy these packs of 5 or 6 boxes of razor blades that are all from different manufacturers, sample packs, and they're pretty cheap. I mean, and they're really good blades, but cost-wise, I'm actually spending less money today than back in the days when I used to have to go into Walmart. So now I'm doing is
I use feather in my razors, which I don't use anymore. But
you use, what do you use?
They're called feather, Feather.
That's the blade.
Yeah, that's the blade name, and that's what I use back in the days when I was shaving. That's what I use.
This is the one. This is what this happens to be. Japanese stainless steel.
Yeah.
Yeah. Is this? I don't know what this. Whoops! I dropped it here. I can show you here.
Without Amazon, right?
Yeah, I just pulled this box out. This was a box that it was in. I had a whole bunch of boxes in here. This wasn't very expensive. I'm kind of blown away by how it says shaving resolution. These are really sharp blades. I really like them. I've done a few different. When you see it, okay, so you can see how quickly I got this nice. It looks like a cylinder, but it's actually kind of a little elliptical. Okay, now I'm going to go ahead and pull this off the front, and then the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to come in here. Okay, now this is where that thread band. Remember the thread band we did? This is where that thread band comes into play. Because what I do is I come in here, I put my scissors against the thread band, just push it up against the back of the bug. I go all the way up against the back, and I trim out the hair. And if I hadn't put the thread band, there's no way I could do this and not be cutting off my collar. So fairly quickly, you can see I've trimmed out the back of the bug. Okay. Now, I don't do this very often at shows, but this is for you guys who really want to take these things and make them real artistic and stuff. I mean, you don't need, like I said, this is so overkill to just creating a fly that fishes. I'm going to back this up, and I want to show you something kind of interesting here. what I've got here, let me see if I can get it in the picture. Yeah, there we go. It's just a little Conair steamer. Okay. All right. So let me turn it on. Let me get it seated here. Let me turn it on. Steam does really magical things to deer hair. What it does is the hair just expands, and then the hair itself actually seems to get a little stiffer, and it makes it so much easier to trim. And this is only if you're really going after, like I said, just those really beautiful, smoothly trimmed, almost showcase kind of bugs. If I'm just doing flat bugs to fish, I'm not going to do this, but I do want to show you the trick here, because I think you're going to be able to see it. Let me get this over here, bring it over, tilt my camera up a little bit. Okay. Like I said, now this is going to be way overkill, but just watch what happens when I do this. Whoops. So I'm getting steam coming out. Now let's see if you can see this happen. Let me get a good one of steam coming out here. There, do you see the hair move? Do you see the hair moving? You see that front hair? Look how that front hair has just popped out. That's all there is to it. Now, I'm going to tell you, there's absolutely no fishing reason to do that, none whatsoever. But if you're looking to get a really beautifully trimmed bass bug, it's a great little trick to do. Now, and you'll notice see that hair, how it's really popped out on the front. Let me go ahead and move my camera back in a little closer. The bug itself. Okay, so now I'm going to come through with my scissors, and I'm going to cut a flat face on it. By the way, I do not, you'll see guys that will use like UV or something on the face of the bug with the idea of making it pop more. And I don't do that. I guess if I wanted a hard faced bug, I could just slap a foam popping bug on a tail and it would be a lot faster and it would pop and do the stuff. I like the softer nature and texture of the deer hair. Okay.
You ever put anything on the bottom of the fly?
Nope, I don't.
Okay.
I just leave it natural deer hair. And the reason I leave it natural deer hair is I really truly believe this, because I've played around with balsa wood and stuff like that. So I have some hard body bugs in my bag that once in a while I'll pull out. And there's an absolute definite difference in the way the fish take them. On a hard bodied, like a balsa wood bug that you're popping, you got to fish it faster, first of all, because it doesn't have quite the same natural movement, but you need to set the hook fairly quickly. And oftentimes you'll notice that the fish will be hooked really on the outside. These guys, when they grab them, they think it's a real piece of food initially. They'll spit them out if you give them enough time, but they'll grab it. And there's a lot of times where I've got to take my forceps and go down and unhook the fish from a little deeper in, because he thought he had a piece of food. Okay, so now you can see, so this is typically the order that I do this in. I start on the belly. You see I've got a fairly sharp edge there. I'll come and I'll use my razor blade and I'll just curve that down in to start opening up that hook shank. Now you look at the sides. I want those sides to taper, so I'm going to come in here on the side and I'm just going to taper each side, and I kind of check it as I go to make sure it's staying proportional. Like that. That looks pretty good. And then what I'll do is, let's see if I can show you here. See how I've created some sharp edges there. So now what I do is I come in here with my razor blade, and I'm just going to start taking off and rounding off those corners, those sharp edges. I just kind of round it off. Do the same thing over here. And I've got it, so I've got it fairly rounded off. Now I'll flip it over. And so I'm going to take this one here, and I'm going to do the same thing to this edge here. I'm going to taper it back a little bit. come in here, get that taper going on the sides. And what I keep checking is, am I staying symmetrical from side to side? The other thing I want to show you too is, look at my, let me see, yeah, look in the razor blade. That almost looks like grains of sand. You know, I'm not taking big, deep cuts. And the other thing too is, let me see if I can, if you take, rather than pushing the blade straight, if you kind of draw it at a 40, if you kind of move it and draw it at a 45, it cuts better. So when I'm coming through here, I got the blade like at a 45 and I'm kind of drawing it back like this in this cutting motion. And it just really does a nice job of cutting this hair.
Hey, Tim, I thought
And
you had a tool to do it curved. Do they make something? I mean, I could probably, I guess, use a pair of pliers to hold it on for straight. I don't have good
You-
feeling in my fingers and so control, so I'd probably cut myself because I shake a lot.
here
I
you
can
go,
get
right
that.
here, right
Then
here.
does
You
that
can do
go
this.
straight? Oh, okay.
Yeah, well, look at the bend in it. I control the
Yeah.
bend. So I
Oh.
can make, see, I can make it more bend or less bend. Okay. So I can put a nice bend in this and I can just do this. Sometimes I do that with these flies. I'll just work this cutter and I'll do a nice, and I can get a really nice smooth cut and just work with your razor blade holder. You know,
Gotcha.
I've worked so long with the razor blade in my hand that I'm pretty comfortable with it, but you could do the entire trim with
So
just
where do
your
you get that
scissors
holder
and this
there,
razor.
Jim?
This is a stone faux
So Tim,
tool, stone faux. I've
Oh,
also
stone
I'm kind of maybe ready to join this company is what is it? I got a card. Hang on just a minute. Let me grab one of their cards.
I will say from, I learned how to do this old school, so I always use scissors. And serrated scissors for trimming deer hair like this is amazing. It's like a game changer. But
Yeah.
when you start using razor blades, those tools now that bend the razor blade, that's really cool.
Yeah. And look, you can use a good pair of scissors and just scissor trim these things. They're not going to have this nice smooth look to it, but the fish don't care. You know, I mean, if your goal is to create a fly that fishes. So these guys, here's the company. And Mike, I can get this to you. And I've got one here. They make a razor blade tool too. I got one at the Midwest show. Where is it here? It's down in
Is
here.
it Andromeda or whatever they call themselves?
Yeah, it is. It's a new company, and boy, I'm going to tell you what. I am. Here it is.
That's A fly
There's their.
code.
I'm sorry. Okay. Here's their razor blade tool, and it has this little slide on it. That helps to bend the blade. I've not pulled it out of the package yet, and I've not tried it out. It's probably half the price of what this stone faux tool is, but I can't tell you how it works. I'm going to try it out here soon, but I haven't tried it out. This is the company. And Mike, I can
A fly code.
yeah,
Okay, thank you.
afflyco.com. You can get online with them. Yeah, and they'll give you some discounts. There's stuff like this pair of scissors right here, I think retails for $25. Which that's, I think, not a bad price and it's a nice pair of scissors. I've been tying with them for quite a while. I mean, I can come in here just with the tips and you see, I don't know if you could see that, but I use the tips to come in here. They're good scissors. And I've been using Soligen scissors, which are almost $50 a pair. They're expensive. They're nice scissors, but after using these guys, I'm not going to use their stuff. I'm not going to order any more Soligens just because they're expensive. And these scissors are perfectly good scissors. All right. So I think we're getting here on the fly. I think it's good enough. I could play with it more as always. Well, I do need to play with it a little bit more.
It's
I
really
love what you can do with those tiger stripes like that. And
sorry,
thank you
say
for
that
showing
again.
us how to do that.
Oh, the stripes on it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
I have a
also
question.
for most people are used to spinning deer hair, and you do more packing, or not
This,
stacking.
yes,
Stacking, I think is the term.
this stacking and packing is
Yeah.
absolutely the way you have to go to get these really nice bass bugs. Now I'm going to show you one. Now, do you want me to do, how are we doing time wise? I don't know where we're at time wise.
I
We're
got a quick
fine.
question if I can, please.
Yeah, jump in. Go ahead.
Do you put a weed guard with mono, like 30-pound mono on it?
I don't. There's my this is my, and this is a small one. There's my lily pad fly right there. It's very lightweight. It's got a double weed guard. It rides over and it's real light. The problem with deer hair is heavy enough that, number one, you got to have a heavy enough weed guard, because it's, if you do a too light a one, it collapses on you. And two, a weed guard is also a fish guard. And so what I work at doing is I fish in and around structure all the time and around lily pads. And I just kind of rely on more casting action. I get up to the edges of that stuff. But if you throw one of these, say you cast one and it drops back behind a lily pad or two, if you just slowly move it out, I mean, just do a real slow strip, it'll just ride around the lily pads. It'll, you won't hook up on lily pads. Now, reeds and wood is a little different, but you can swim these out of lily pads if you're very careful with them. But I use these mainly. I just work more at my casting accuracy and I work on the edges of stuff. And if I decide I want to really go back into the middle of the weeds, I do some kind of a little foam, lightweight foam thing like this that does have weed guards on it. And whoops, let me get it back in the camera, that I can do. This is just a little one of these little STP frogs, that you can get the cutters for them. And I have a, some of those in my box to fish back in the real weeds. So no, I've stopped doing, I used to put them on, but I stopped doing it. All right, let me finish out here. Oops, what's going on here? I lost track of where I was at. Oh, yeah. I didn't cut my tag off. Let's do that first.
I think red's a special color.
It is. I finish a lot of my bugs with a red thread. It just makes this nice little pop of color on the front of the fly. Normally I'd use my half hitch tool. I'm not sure where it's disappeared to here. It might be down in my waist troll. I got to go find it. Okay.
Not many people can still do half hitches with their hands.
Well, and you know what? Yeah, being able to do a half hitch with your hand is still a useful skill. At least I think it is, because I'm amazed at how often I end up doing it. Okay, now again, overkill, but I'm going to show you one more time. Okay, so take a look at it now. Look at how it looks. We'll bring my steamer over again. And again, this is if you're just trying to get this fly looking really pretty. Get that steam going again. And now watch what happens.
A little bit off camera.
Take a look at it now. See how the collars just popped right out?
Yeah.
And again, that will happen if you fish them and they get wet and you're casting them through the air and stuff. That will happen. But the other thing too is it really takes this front face, and takes those extra little hairs out, and you can kind of come and just do that final little trim there on it.
Well, and then when you pop it, it has a lot flatter of a face. It can give a little bit more of a commotion.
Yeah, and the truth is, these flies, I can, if I give it a good hard strip, it'll do the, the spray thing. But what I do with them more often is I just a little slower strip, and they bulge. They kind of bulge the water. They're a much subtler presentation than throwing something that's just going to really pop and spray and do stuff. And I find that to be a very successful way to retrieve these guys. Okay, so let's finish this out. If you guys are hanging in there with me, let's finish this out with some legs. Just whatever legs you want. These just happen to be some Montana fly legs. They're kind of a, the bottom of this belly. I might try finding some yellow too down here if I wanted to. Probably I would if I didn't want to move along, but they're just kind of a, you can see they're centipede legs. They're the mediums. On this size fly, I go mediums. I go, one of the legs I really like is Montana Fly Sexy Floss legs. Here's some of that stuff. The thing about this stuff is it's really tough. I mean, really tough. You can't hardly break these guys. These are a little more fragile, and the silicone ones are really fragile. You got to be careful with the silicone one. Then I put, I don't know, 3. What have I got in my hand? I've got 3, 4. We'll put 4 legs in this.
There's an example of, I think, what you're talking about with that one you did at the fly show.
Mm-hmm.
Is that the silicone legs?
Yes, that is the Sexy Floss legs.
Yeah, Sexy Floss.
That Montana Fly makes. Those are great legs. They're really, really tough. I really like that about them. The problem is because of the material, you can see here the white doesn't come out really nice and white like these do. Yeah, but that's one that I did with the Sexy Floss legs. And the silicone legs, the thing about the silicone legs, they're in the little sheets. You just got to be pretty gentle with them when you'll see what I'm going to pull through here. Okay, now also, if you happen to be someone who has my book, you'll notice in my book that when I got to that first stack, I overhand knotted and put my legs in, and then I finished out the head of the fly. Then when I trimmed it, I trimmed around the legs. I did a little sidebar article on this technique I'm going to show you right now. Tying the legs on, they're on solid. They're not going anywhere. Once in a great while, when you do what I'm going to do, and the bob gets really fished a lot and it gets really waterlogged and all that, the legs will come loose. But the trade-off is I get to use that template and do this really fast trim on the bug. And so I'm willing to do that. And quite frankly, if the legs fall out, I can take that bug, put it aside in my box and bring it back at the end of the summer and put legs back in it if I want to keep the bug going. So now I'm going to do, I got this in a darning needle. I'm going to come in here somewhere right about the back 1/3 of it. Now here's the thing, you want this needle to go through above the hook shank. You don't want to be below the hook shank. You want to come above the hook shank, bring them all the way through. And then when you bring them in, you want to pull them and put some downward pressure and work them down towards the hook shank. And you got to keep in mind, the deeper you go into the body, the more compressed and dense the hair is. So I know, for example, Sean West, who's a really great West Coast deer hair tire. If you've ever seen any of his stuff, it's beautiful. He doesn't do anything. He stops right there and just leaves them in there because the hair is dense enough, it holds it. I don't do that. The other glue that I use is Dave's Flex Cement. And here's what Dave's Flex Cement is, at least I think what it is. It's goop cement. I see different guys that have used, different glues and stuff. What I like about goop is it works and it's readily available. You can pretty much walk into any hardware store. A lot of times, even a grocery store has this stuff. Then, if you go into a paint department and you buy like a quart of toluene, which is you don't want to breathe the fumes. It's the jar. My thing is out in the garage. But I now take this bottle, and this bottle's been going for ages, and I keep this is goop with toluene in it. So it's real thin. I got it to about the thinness of water. Let me come grab my stick here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull the legs towards me a little bit. I come up on this side, and I'm going to take these legs, and I'm going to just coat the edge right up near the body. I'm just going to coat the legs with this stuff. And then when I draw it back in, what's interesting, when you draw it back in, the glue kind of acts a little bit like a lubricant, and you can really seat it down in there. And so now you got those legs well seated. And then I'm just going to come, and I like my legs to come back to, I want good movement on them. I don't want them short. I bring them back maybe just a little shy of my tail. There's no total magic size to them. Just trim them out. And then I'm going to take this cauterizing tool. You can see it. And you can see it getting, you can see it getting red. You see the smoke. This is the point where if I don't have my door closed, I get a call from downstairs wondering if I'm burning hair again. Would you please close the door and open the window? Yeah. Susan's like, oh yeah, I know that smell. So there, I just did a little eye socket. Come over on the other side. I'll do a little eye socket. The thing, you can do it with scissors. The nice thing about the tool, this tool, is it makes a really nice, precise circle. It makes a nice, precise eye socket for you to put the eyes in. So let me pop that out. Just clean the ash out of it a little bit. Now let's find some eyes. I apologize, guys. I did not pull eyes out earlier. I should have. Let me find something down in there that will work.
So I've always just glued eyes on, and I have read where if you make a socket for it, there's a lot more glue contact area or whatever in the.
Yeah, there
Basically
is,
staying.
and you protect the edges of the eye a little bit from because if you just set them right on the surface, that edge
Right.
is exposed, and if the fish grabs it or whatever, it can knock it out. But I have fished a lot of one-eyed and no-eyed flies and caught plenty of bass on them. I don't think they care that much. I care because this is the point where the fly just sort of starts talking to me, I love putting eyes in them. I love the way they look. So I'm doing a two-part thing here. I did this real thinned out goop. And then let's see, I'm going to roll this over and see if you can see this happen. I think it makes them a little tougher, but let me see if this will work now. Yeah, I didn't see that one as much. Yeah, no, there it goes. The glue, what happens in the glue, I know you guys probably can't see it. It gets kind of shiny and it settles down into the hair. And that's because this stuff is interacting with the thinner of the previous step. And now I can take my eye and just seat it right into that socket, into that glue, and just kind of work it right in there. And there's the eye. Now let's come on this side and do the same thing.
Tim, I'll tell you, I've watched a lot of people tie hair bugs, but nobody
Yeah.
has inspired me to actually tie one except you. Thank you.
Well, I thank you very much. I was a teacher my whole life. And so, I enjoy tying these things, but what I enjoy even more is when somebody goes, "Hey, I watched you," or "I watched your video, and guess what? I tied one of these things." And that's what I'm hoping that, my instruction, teaching, demo, whatever, is the strongest part of what I do, more so even than what I tie.
Well, I was a
I'm
teacher
hoping-
too for many, many years, and yeah, you're striking a chord with me, so thank you.
Okay, well, you're very welcome. Yes, well, good for you for being a teacher. You know, we, I didn't make a lot of money. There were a lot of times during the course of that time I was frustrated, but now that I'm retired and look back, I can't think of anything else I could have done with my life that would have had more meaning than that. So,
Now, as a matter of fact, I spent all day yesterday out with a bunch of sixth graders teaching them how to fish, and it was just a ball.
oh, great. Yeah, I teach at the Michigan Youth Trout Camp every year. Okay, what I did there while we were just talking is this is just Hallie Sanson's Hard as Nails. Get it in any grocery store or anywhere. And what I did is the red wraps I put in there, I just really soaked the heck out of them. And then I just took a feather and I cleaned the eye out because this, like it says, it's hard as nails. So if it creates a little skim across the top around the hook shank and you got to poke it out, it is have little sharp edges on it. So I like to get that out of there. And so there it is. There's the finished bass bug. That's it. I don't know how
I-
you guys did
I got a
good
friend-
job hanging in there. It's a long process when I explain it all.
No, thank you. I've got a friend he gave me $500 for Christmas as a gift because he wants me to
Yeah.
tie him one fly. But I know
Yeah.
since he's in Conroe, I know that I want to, and he wants to go bass fishing in his pond in Illinois. I bought myself a bunch of deer hair so I can tie something like this. I've been
Okay.
amazed, artistic thing, and people kind of know I also like to tinker with stuff, so
Yeah.
I'm a, I'm kind of an experimenter. So, I mean, this just gives me all sorts of ideas. Now, my wife and my dogs may not like deer hair everywhere, but oh, well,
Oh,
but thank you.
yeah. Well, believe me, look. Whoops. Can you see up? I don't see myself anymore. Can you see?
Yeah. So yeah, I just recently bought some deer hair so I can start doing it. It was spinning deer hair just to try to make something like this.